Hi guys, it's Becky. And when I opened up this Roaring Twenties Potomac Beads Treasure box, and I saw that they had sent us some beading thread, I thought that what I would do with this month's box is do an easy beginner-friendly bead weaving project because, I learned most of my bead weaving stuff from Potomac Beads originally, and it's really great and really easy to do. I was actually kind of afraid to get started for a really long time. I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And then once I did, I was like, you know what? I really actually enjoy this a lot. So we're going to do that. We're going to use just things that came in the box. For this, I am adding a needle. Basically, the only additions that I'm adding are the tools. Like I've got my scissors for cutting my thread. I have a little lighter thing that I can use to burn down my thread at the end, and basically a needle. And that's all I'm adding. The clasp is going to come from the box. All the beads will come from the box. The thread will come from the box. And so we're going to do that, and it's going to be 100% something that I think anyone can do because we're going to be using some larger beads as well as our little tiny 11-0 seed beads. And I'm just going to pull out all of these 11-0 drucks that are the Jet AB. They've got that one side with the AB finish on it, but then it's black on the other side. I'm going to pull all of these guys out. So we're going to go ahead and use these in our little bead weaving project. I'm going to make a bracelet, and I'm going to use a fairly easy stitch. It's a simple spiral stitch. If you are familiar with spiral stitch, you'll know what I'm talking about. It is easy to remember. It's easy to follow. There's only a little part of it, and I'll explain when we get there, that you're going to want to be paying attention specifically to how you're putting your needle through. But it'll work out really well. And I need to dig out the clasp from this area because it's underneath all of the earring wires. So we've got this little figure 8 clasp. And where's the other part of it? It's over here. This was one of the things that came in the box, and we're going to use that for the closure on our bracelet. So you've got those, and then I think we're also going to be using the 11-0 seed beads that came here, these silver unlined ones. And I had sorted the check glass mix. I sorted some of these into the little containers that we got. We'll do a second project with these 2-hole beads, but for this one, I'm going to pull out this section, which has some of these tiny Jet AB beads and some of these rondelles. So we're going to be using the 11-0 seed beads, the 8-0 beads, and probably the rondelles. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I might alternate some of them or see how many I have for this, because however many of the big beads I use, I'm going to want at least 2, I think, of these smaller ones. So we'll find out if that'll be enough, and if not, then maybe these flatter beads will work because there might be enough of those. But like I said, I'm just using beads from the box. So I've got these beads that came out of that check glass bead mix, which was a lot of fun to sort, I have to say. It was really fun sorting them out. So we've got those, and then we've got our dragon thread. And I like dragon thread. I have used it before for some of my other projects. It is, it's not as stiff as, say, wildfire or fireline. It is, where's my end? Is that it? I think that's it right there. You can see, move just a little bit closer so you can see it too. It's right there, that little end on the end of this. If you can't find it, just kind of look along the side. If you need to use the magnification function on your phone to see it better, try using that, and then I'm going to grab it with my pliers. See if I can get that out. Wait a minute, no, that's the other end. This end. That's where my first end is. Okay. Aha, I found the correct end for this. But yeah, I like the dragon thread. It is it's pretty strong, and you can feel it. It's not the thermally bonded type of thread. It's a little more like maybe Nymo or something. So it'll give you some drape and some movement if you're going to use it for like some fringe or something like that, but it's still pretty strong. And that's the size 6. I've used it in some of my other projects before. It comes in some really cool colors. And that's one of the reasons that I've used it for that. So we've got our thread. I prefer using wide eye beading needles because they are just easier for me to thread, because you can open it up like that and there's a large area that I can stick my thread into. But English style beading needles are also something that you can use. One trick that I learned from some other folks to make it a little easier is when you find the end of your thread, if you take your pliers and just kind of clamp it down, it flattens it out a little bit like that. And that can make it a little bit easier to get it into that tiny hole on the English style beading needles. I don't need to do this trick for this, but that's something that you might do if you're using a different style of needle. Just something I thought I'd pass along, because when I have tried to do this, it does actually work a lot better than just trying to smush it in there and not succeeding and getting frustrated like usually happens to me. But here we are. So we've got our beads, we've got our beading needle, we've got our thread, and the surface that I'm using, this is actually a bead on it board, and they sell these and make them actually, Potomac Beads. It's one of their brands, and it's one of my favorite beading surfaces, and it's got some weight, so like it's a little bit harder for it to be like accidentally knocked off of your lap or something, but it also has this little divot on the end, so if it does get bumped and your beads go around, they're not gonna like roll off your mat. They'll end up in this little pocket instead, and you can pick it up and take it with you somewhere else. So it's, again, one of my favorite for bead weaving bead surfaces to use, and they have those at Potomac Beads. There's also a second site where they sell like more colors and sizes of these. This is the 9x12 size, or is it 9x11? I can't remember. It's a certain size that like it's pretty easy for me to use. And actually, something I've found is this side right here, from here to here, that is about the length for a bracelet that will fit me, like on the inside of it, not from the outside end to this end. It's just right here from the curve to the curve. So if I line up these beads over here in this channel, that will tell me how many beads I need to use to get a bracelet that will fit my 7.5-inch wrist. That's something that I figured out just by using it, is that this is about the length for a bracelet size that will actually fit me, so I don't have to actually like measure it out or anything. I'm going to put these extra beads away so that they're not out on there. And like I said, I'm just going to count how many of these I have, because I'm going to want, I think, twice that number for these smaller beads. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Okay, so there's 18 of those. I know you guys enjoy counting with Becky. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 plus 1. Okay, so I'm probably going to go ahead and have enough of these. Yay! It's nice to count out your beads before you start to make sure that you'll have enough. And actually, I think I'm going to actually alternate them. I'm going to do one with these and one with these, just to be sure. Just to be sure, because I think I might actually need twice plus 2. I don't know. Anyway, so spiral stitch is pretty easy to use. Let me finish getting out my beads, and then I'll pull over my notebook and I'll draw it out for you how it's supposed to go. And it'll make more sense while you're watching me do it, but I'm going to kind of explain how it works before we get started. So I've got my 11 seed beads. Again, they were the ones that came in the box. I've got some check glass beads that came in the mix, and then I've got these drucks that came in the box on a strand. And here's my little notebook. We're going to take a look at the way it goes. So the way I'm going to start it is I'm going to make a little loop with some 11 seed beads that's going to go through the end of the clasp. And they'll all go through the same 11 seed bead. And the thread will probably go through here twice. I am going to reinforce it by going through a second time after I finish beading the whole thing. Then I'm going to have my larger bead and another larger bead right next to it. Then the thread will go down. This is hitting my thing. I'm going to move it just a little bit of ways away. There you go. And the thread will come out of this bead, and it'll come back around up this side to the beginning of this bead. This is our number 1 bead, and this is our number 2 bead. So it goes up to the top of the first bead from the bottom of the second bead. And there's going to be some seed beads along here, and one of the other beads, and some seed beads along here. And the number of seed beads will vary based on the size of this bead and the size of the beads that you'll put along the side. You don't even have to have this. You could just have some seed beads. So the thread goes down here, and then it'll come up again, and then out that way. And again, we'll have some more beads along this side, and it'll go like that. And then we're going to add another of the larger beads. And this one will no longer be the number 2 bead, it'll be the number 1 bead. And that will be the number 2 bead. And the thread will go from the bottom of the second bead to the top of the first bead, back through both of these beads, and up to the other side. And that's the way that we're going to weave it as we go through, and we're just going to keep adding these beads, come back, add another bead, come back, and it'll go all that whole way. The only tricky part that we're going to need to be paying attention to is here when we go through for that next pass. And all it matters is consistency. If you do it in front of this other strand, then the next time you do it in front of that strand and in front of that strand, so that they're kind of scalloped as they lay. And you'll see that as we go. So let's get this started now that I've kind of explained how we're going to do it. And I'm going to pull off a wingspan of this by holding my arms out straight from my body with the spool in one hand and the end in my other, because that is about how much thread I can manage at a time. And I'm probably going to need to add more thread halfway through this, and that's fine, because when we get to that point, I'll show you how we add thread. And for this, if you've got a regular beading needle, you might put the needle somewhere in the middle of your thread, because you can move it along as you go and as you use more thread. With the large A beading needles, they have a tendency to this pointy end at the back go through the thread, like the fibers of the thread sometimes, which makes it difficult to move the needle along. So I'm going to put it sort of closer to the end of this, which is just going to be a little bit harder than it might otherwise be for me to manage my thread, but it's still doable. And that's just one of the extra considerations if you're using a different style of needle than an English style beading needle. Okay, so down here near the end, I'm going to want to leave myself about this much thread from the inside of your thumb to the end of your first finger. That's about enough thread to be able to tie knots or, you know, weave through some of the beads later if you want to do that. But that's where I'm going to kind of stop it and start it. And I'm going to take my first part of my connector and I am going to put on 10 11/0 seed beads. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Whoop. I dropped a couple. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Actually, no, let's do 11. I just changed my mind. 11 seed beads and move them down here to where I've got my finger on the other side. And you could do like 5 and then go through this and then do the other 5. Or since this hole is large enough, I'm just going to go through it and it can rotate along there. And I'm just going to take this last seed bead here on the end and I'm going to go through it in the opposite direction from the way that that thread was going before. And I'm just holding on to my thread. You can use a stop bead if you want. That's fine. But this is going to make my loop that attaches this end to that part of my clasp. So that's just the beginning of it. And if you wanted to, you could use a wire guardian and go through it and attach it to the clasp that way. If you did that, you'd probably would do like 3 of these beads and then the wire guardian and 3 of those beads and the wire guardian. I'm just going to go ahead and use this. And like I said, when I come back and reinforce it at the end, we'll reinforce that loop at that point. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and get started with my bead weaving. And I'm going to make sure that we're not coming through there. And so the first thing I'm going to do is pick up 2 of these beads and put it on my thread. This is the only time that you're going to be picking up 2 of them. Every time after that, it's just going to be 1 bead at a time. I'm going to put it over here next to the beginning. Ellen sure is talking a lot today, isn't she? You wouldn't think that she spent the entire morning snuggling with me, would you? You would think that she is the most neglected dog on the planet. Because of course she is. Okay, so here's where we're going to figure out how many beads we need between the bottom of this second bead and the top of the first bead. So I've got 5 beads on my needle right here. And I'm going to pop this guy on. Then I'm going to put 5 more beads, and I'm going to see if that's enough. Because I don't want it to be too loose, but I also don't want there to be like thread showing. So it's 5 beads, that one, and then 5 beads. I'm going to go ahead and scooch them along here. Like that. I'm going to go down into the top of the first bead, through the second bead, and if you can do this in one pass, that's great. If you need to do 1 bead at a time, you can do that. There's no stopping you. So let's find out. And yep, that looks like that is going to be a sufficient amount of beads, and it looks good, and it's not too floppy. So that's going to be my number. So my next step is, now that I've got it done on one side, I need to go back up along the other side using the same number of beads. So I'm going to do 5 seed beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's get a little bit closer. And I've got this laying down here because it's going to be real floppy, like the first couple, and it's just going to be easier for me to not have to hold it in my hands while I'm doing that. So I've got my first 4, not 5, 5 of my seed beads. Pick up this smaller direct, which is also Jet AB, so it goes perfectly with those beads. and then 5 more seed beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. I'm sorry, my hand keeps hitting that. I need to start from higher up, I guess. And then we go from the bottom to the top of those 2 beads. So you're only going top to bottom 2 beads at a time. But your number 1 and number 2 bead will change each time you add a new bead. All right. So that is the beginnings of our spiral stitch. Let's add a second bead, and I'm going to show you how to make sure that you're going through like above or below that other one. So since it's laying down flat, I'm probably going to try to be consistent and go above it so that my next strand will lay over the top of it. I'll show you in a minute. So now that I've got my second bead on here, and I'm just going to scooch the bead all the way up here so that you can see them all together. So now that I've got my second bead on here, I'm going to go from the bottom of this second bead. So yes, there are 3, but this one doesn't count anymore. It's just 1 and 2. From the bottom of the second one to the top of this first one. So the second one is now the first one, and it just is going to keep going down like that as you progress. So I'm going to grab my 5 seed beads, my tiny direct, and then 5 seed beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, counting with Becky. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like this. Scooch those down. And now for my thread path, you might have to pick it up and wiggle it a little bit. I'm going to go into the top of this 1 and 2, the first bead. Yeah, you might have to pick it up to do this. Probably will as we go through. I just want to make sure that you guys can see this well. Give a little tug. Give my end a little tug. And that's what I'm talking about with laying over the top of that first strand. So my first strand is down here. My second strand is over the top. The next one that I put on, I'm going to make sure that it goes over the top of this second strand so that they're scalloped, so they lay layered over each other. And that's the only real gotcha with this beading pattern. And it's a simple, beginner-friendly bead weaving pattern. There's not too many tiny beads. It's mostly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just some 11-ohs that you have to go through here. And we're not making multiple passes and coming back and doing other things on top of it. It's just going to be at the end, after I get it the right length that I want, that I go back through. I'm going to go back through all of these beads and just reinforce that other end. But that won't be until we get to the very end. So it's fairly simple, fairly easy. And I think anyone can do this. From top to bottom, it's just a spiral stitch. That's what this is called. Well, flat spiral stitch. There's a different one that's spiral stitch. This is flat spiral stitch because it's flat on either side. So I'm just going to pick it up now. And yeah, it's a little loose, it's a little floppy, but it'll tighten up as we go. I'm going to put on my next one. And then I'll get ready to do that again. And after I put on my beads, I'll go in through the top right here and out through both of these beads. I'm just going to keep doing this until I have all of my beads added, or it's the length that I want, whichever comes first. When I get to the part where I need to add more thread to this project, I will come back here and I'll show you where I need to, how I add more thread, because I'm probably going to be adding more thread. I'm just, wingspan is like the maximum amount of thread that I can handle. And so that's why I pull that amount off, but I'm probably going to need more to finish this up. So I'll show you how to add thread partway through this project. Okay guys, so I am at a point where I need to add more thread. I have a little bit left, but rather than doing a whole other repeat and then not having very much to weave back through my work with, I'm going to go ahead and add more thread when I've got about, I'd say about 10 inches left of this, because I do need to add quite a bit more thread. But while I'm doing this, I thought I'd take the time to also weave in my beginning tail and show you how to weave that in. I went ahead and just popped one of these beads on here and then went back through it twice, just around to loop the thread here, just to act as a bead stopper, so that while I'm working on this end, my beads don't all come off. So I'm just going to take, see, and this is why I want to take care of this on this end. It's because this end isn't secured and this loop is starting to come undone. So it's probably something that you'd want to do when you get to maybe like the second or third bead when you're doing this, because I am going to be using some of this for it. Also, I realized after the fact, after I did like the third bead, that I wasn't alternating these like I said I was going to. So I've got my small check truck, the tiny like 4mm one, and then these two like rondelle type beads. I put two of them because two stacked together is about the same size as this small 4mm bead is. And that means that I won't have to add extra seed beads on either side, but you can also see how they lay when you make sure that the strand goes in front of the other one or behind the other one, depending on which way you're going to be using it. I also realized that I'm probably going to need a few more of these beads, but that's fine because there's enough in the box for me to be able to do that. So, because I know I'd counted it out and got about 19 or 18. I'm probably going to need about 24 of them actually. All right, so for this thread, I'm going to just pop another needle onto the end of this thread. As I've demonstrated before, I usually like to use big wide-eye needles because it's easier to get them on and off. And now that that's through there, see, I had my loop going up and then it goes back down through one of these. So I'm just going to go all the way through one of these. Let's get a little closer so you can see. So one of these arms or legs or sides, however you want to look at it. And I'm going to go all the way through this whole strand. I went part way and now I'm going to go the rest of the way. And that's because I couldn't fit the needle all the way through this whole thing because it curves. So I'm just going a few beads at a time all the way through here. And this is going to reinforce this front part too because it's a little floppy. That's fine. I'm going to go back up through both of these beads till I'm coming out the top again. And I'm going to reinforce my loop. I'm going to go back up through this one bead that I've got all of my threads running through. Sorry, I'm not holding that great. There we go. Back up through that one and then up one side of my loop. Down the other side of my loop. This is just going to reinforce everything and get this tail end in here a little bit better. Now I want to move the end of my string a little further away from my loop before I tie it off, so that it's not right there at the part of this that's going to be having the most wear on it. I'm going to go ahead and move my needle with my thread down this other side. It's the opposite side to the one that I already went down. I just went through as many of those as I could. All the way down there, all the way to here. And I don't have a lot of thread left, so I'm going to use what I do have. And see this middle thread right here between these two larger beads? Just gonna stick my needle under that. It makes a little bit of a loop. I'm gonna hold it with my thumb so it doesn't go all the way through. And then I'm gonna go through with my needle that loop and pull it taut. And I'm gonna do the same thing over again. So it's 2 half hitch knots that I'm tying with my thread. All right, so now that's reinforced. This is in here, and we'll reinforce it again when we get there. But I can go ahead and cut this, and then if you want to burn the end down with a lighter or something, you can. See how it's got, let me pull back a little bit so you can see how you've got that thread right there. You can use a thread burner or a lighter and just burn it down so it's not sticking out. And you can tap it because it is plastic, so it makes a little bit of, well, it's nylon. All right, so then you've got that, and you can continue over here. So basically on this side, I'm going to be weaving this end back into my work. So let me take off my little stop bead that I made. Now that I've got my beginning tail woven in. All right, so the part that I ended at was after I had done both sides, and it's coming out here. I'm just going to go back through one of these, maybe 2 of them, and then tie off a little further up in here away from this this part of my work here. So again, big eye needle, put my end back through it. I could have left this on the needle and just used a second needle for the first part. That would have probably been just fine. That's okay. So I'm going to go back up away from this part where I'm ending with this thread. Just traveling up the work. That side. And I'm going to go through just this one bead right here. Go under here. And I just moved that leg of beads aside so that I could get to this one that was under it. I'm going to go up it. And I'm going all on the same side for this part of it because I am going to be going back up through here. So I went up through here, this full side, down through this bead, up through this side, and then I went up through this bead, and I'm going to go down through this side. That's just making sure that where I'm ending it is pretty far away from where I need to join my new needle. Okay. And here I am. See how I've got my little strand in the middle there? I'm going to go ahead and make a knot there the same way I did with the other one, by making a loop after I sew under it, and then going through that loop and pulling that taut. And I'm going to do that again, go under that strand, that middle strand, just the middle strand if I can. Now I'm going to go through that loop and pull it taut. Go. I'm going to cut that strand and pull off another wingspan's worth of thread from the spool. I'm just going to grab with one end and then hold this so that it spins while I'm doing it. You hold it lightly, and then I'm going to stretch my arms wide apart, and that's how I get my wingspan. All right, so let's add our needle. And I'm going to start 3 beads down from the end. I'm going to go all the way through this. And I went up through, to me, if I'm looking at it from the start to the front, through the right side. So I'm just going to go back up around through the left side to get to the part where I am exiting this from. But I am going to leave myself enough of a tail that I can make a knot with it after I weave this in over here on this end. I'm not tying it off to anything yet. I just want to get this established as a strand that I'm working with. So I'm going through the left side. Actually, if I turn it over, it's not the left side anymore, it's the right side. It's basically following the same thread path that I used to start this, just not going up both sides of the work. All right. So now I'm going to go all the way out to that side. And this is just looping around this several times to just make it a little more secure for this end. You don't have to go through as much as this. You could just tie 2 strands together a little bit further back, but I like to make sure it's secure, because the last thing I want to do is to restring my beads after I wear it once. All right, now going back through both of these. Where this is coming out is exactly where I want it to be, so that I can continue the pattern by adding my large bead and then picking up my 5 11-ohs. Looks like, judging by my pattern, I've got this direct, so I'm going to be picking up 2 of these and then 5 11-ohs and then sewing back down. and then doing that again with this bead in place. But before I do that, I'm going to take this end, see if I give it a tug, that thread isn't going anywhere. So I don't even have to tie this off if I don't want to. That thread is not going anywhere. It is not moving at all because I went around a few times to get that started. But I am actually going to, where did I put it? I just had it. I'm going to pop this other needle on here and just do a real quick knot there. I know there is debate to knot or not to knot. That is the question. With bead weaving, I like knots. I feel more secure on some of the things where they're like, oh, you don't need to do a knot. I've actually had it come undone on me. After following some tutorials where like, you don't need to tie knots, it's fine. I never tie knots. And then the thing that I made came undone on me and I lost some of my beads and I was like, oh, okay, well, that didn't work for me. Maybe it works for you, but it did not work for me. So I like knots. I feel more secure with them. And so you see I've got some thread sticking out. I'm gonna grab my little lighter. Come on, buddy. There we go. Just gonna burn those down so they aren't sticking out. Burn you down a little bit more. There we go. And there's like thread zappers, things you can buy that will both cut your thread and burn it down at the same time. I don't have one of those. That's fine. You don't have to have all the fancy gadgets. You can just do this with a needle and a lighter and some scissors. It's totally fine. Like, that's one of the things about this, is that it is a pretty accessible part of this what is it called, this hobby, is that you don't have to have a ton of equipment. You don't have to have pliers for this. You don't have to have crimpers for this. You don't have to have just a lot of things. You just have to have beads and string and a needle, you know? All right, so I've got my beads and I'm just gonna, since I'm talking to y'all, having a little visit while I was showing you this, I'm just gonna get myself started finishing this, and I'm just gonna keep going with this until I get it to the size that I want it. So I had my 2 beads and I'm going to go back up to, because this is number 1 and this is number 2, back to the top of 1 from the bottom of 2. Okay. And then I'll do that again for the other side and add another bead and do that again. But like I said, I'm alternating these drucks and 2 of these so that I have enough beads to go through that. That's the only reason that I'm alternating them. So it kind of makes it fun there when you look at the side. Little bit of visual interest. Anyway, I'm going to get this to the length that I want and I'll show you how to finish it up when we get there. Okay, so we are almost done. Let's finish up this bracelet. I actually ended up using 21 of my larger beads, these 8mm beads that came in the box. And it is as long, see, I told you that's about the right length for that. Anyway, so it's about as long as I want it to be, to also give me some room, because this takes up about 1 inch of space on my wrist for us to have this hook. So I've still got my string attached to my needle and it's coming right out of this. I have not reinforced any of this yet, but I want to attach my hook. So I'm going to pick up 5 11/0 seed beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm gonna go, actually, you know what? Yeah, no, let's do 6, not 5. because I want it to mirror the other side. And remember, there were 11 total seed beads that I used for the other side. I'm going to go ahead and go through my hook. You can go through before or after, it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to pick up the rest of these 5 seed beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I am going to sew through the first seed bead that I added to this little strand of seed beads here, this one right here. I'm going to sew through this, and I'm going to sew down through this arm of seed beads along the side, because we're going to reinforce this. So I'm going to go all the way up here. Similar to the way we reinforced the other side when I was sewing in that tail. Okay. I'm going to go back through both of these beads here at the end, the larger ones. Oop. Bumped my camera. And I'm going to sew back through this whole loop. And when I come out, I'm going to go into this other side. See how it's pulled over to this side? I want to center that again, and I can do that when I go back through it again. So I'm going to go back in through here, up through my loop of beads, through these beads and my clasp. And as with the other one, I said you could use a wire guardian instead of a little loop of beads. But I'm just doing this with what came in the box. This is what this this tutorial is. It's a you don't need to buy extra stuff to make this work tutorial. All right. So I'm going through here, through these 3 last beads and this one bead here in the center. I'm going to pull it taut when I do that. Oop, that is going around my hook the wrong way. I can probably, there we go. You just have to be careful sometimes when you've got bits like that. Okay, so now that my hoop or my loop is reinforced, I'm going to go back up through this side, because remember I went through this side up here. I'm going to go through this other side again, and then we are going to work this thread back up away from where this loop is before we tie it off. That is reinforced. Right. I'm going to go back through just this one bead. I'm not going to go all the way out to this other one. Through this one bead. I'm just turning it over, the work, so that it is easier for me to get to this arm of beads, because I'm going to work my way up this side. And I'm just going to go through one bead again. And I'm going to work up through this other side. You can, work up any way you want, as long as you're taking that thread farther away from where the loop is. All right. I'm going to go just through this one bead. See this bit of thread between these beads? I am going to tie a double half hitch here by passing my needle underneath that little bar of thread and then through the loop that I created here, just like I did on the other side. Do that again, go underneath that bar of thread and then go through this thread loop. And now I can cut that off, burn it down. See, I've got that little bit of thread there. Just gonna burn that down. Oops, wrong one. All right, and now I have a completed flat spiral stitch bracelet. That will fit around my wrist, and I used all beads that came in the Potomac Beads Treasure box, and I used the thread that came in it too, and it's this 20 meters. That's actually the size that they sell a lot of these spools. They sell longer spools too, but if you just wanted to get a little bit of dragon thread, they've got that. Anyway, thank you for joining me, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!